Talk about this issue of police brutality and the significance of the parents of Michael Brown coming to testify.
Well, the Committee Against Torture takes an interest in the measures that the United States has in place to control excessive use of force and police brutality. These measures is inter alia that all alleged cases are investigated, prosecuted, and punished. And when we look at the statistics, we heard from the United States delegation that during the last 5 years, a little over 300 cases have been criminally prosecuted of police officers. We asked for the results of these prosecutions, but we have not received this information. So there's still doubt as to whether the mechanisms to hold police officers accountable for excessive use of force, police brutality, and even police shootings are properly in place. Another issue of importance is whether there are independent oversight bodies that can check up on the way the power is administered in the law enforcement. And also here we have some doubts whether police review boards are sufficiently independent. So these are some of the concerns that the committee has expressed vis-à-vis the United States delegation.
And Dr. Modvig, could you put this in context, what's occurring here in the United States vis-a-vis other advanced industrialized nations, this whole issue of excessive force or killings by police of civilians as they perform their law enforcement functions? Is the United States more or less similar to other countries, or is there an outlier in terms of the amount of force used against its citizens?
Well, that's difficult to assess exactly because there's not full transparency. We have asked the United States delegation for complete statistics about alleged excessive use of force and the reactions in terms of investigations and prosecutions and punishments. And this is the means to obtain transparency in this field. And this is the recommendations that the committee have been doing towards the United States.
And can you go through those recommendations?
They are that each case of alleged excessive use of force, each complaint over police officers needs to be fully investigated by an independent body. And in case there are basis for prosecution, then the prosecution should be done. And if found guilty, the police officer should be punished accordingly. Further, the victims that have been subjected to excessive use of force should be able to receive remedy for this.
Do you have an opinion on the grand jury decision that was handed down against the police officer who killed Mike Brown? No indictment.
No, I think the committee respects the decision of the grand jury. We are not in a position to evaluate that.
I want to play for you comments President Obama made 6 years ago, shortly before he took office, about whether the CIA officials involved in torture should be prosecuted. He appeared on the ABC News program this week.
I don't believe that anybody is above the law. On the other hand, I also have a belief that we need to look forward as opposed to looking backwards. And part of my job is to make sure that, for example, at the CIA, you've got extraordinarily talented people who are working very hard to keep Americans safe. I don't want them to suddenly feel like they've got to spend all their time looking over their shoulders and lawyering.
That was President Obama speaking on ABC back in January of 2009.
Dr. Jens Modvig, your response to that and what you found around the issue of torture.
There's no doubt, according to the Convention Against Torture, state parties has a very clear obligation to investigate cases of torture, to prosecute perpetrators of torture, and to punish severely according to the serious nature of the crime of torture. That is a very clear obligation according to the convention.
What about your findings at Guantanamo? Can you talk about what has happened in the United States over this period since 2001? President Obama, one of his first executive orders closing Guantanamo within a year. Of course, that hasn't happened, and it's well over 6 years later.
On a positive note, the U.S. delegation recognized that the convention and its absolute prohibition against torture and ill treatment also applies to territories outside the U.S. where the U.S. has government authority, and that this includes Guantanamo. So first and foremost, there's no doubt that the prohibition against torture also applies for Guantanamo detainees. However, the committee has raised concern about the continued indefinite detention in Guantanamo. Apparently, the number of hunger strikes that are implemented by the detainees in protest of the detention conditions, and certainly also the procedures that are made official of how hunger strikers are force-fed a treatment that definitely amount to ill treatment and possibly even to torture.